I've cut out all of my pieces from the template, so the template link that I give you, you just need to print it out, cut the pieces out, and then trace them onto the felt that you're using. You can use any type of felt, wool felt, acrylic felt, the other types of felt that are available, eco felt, whatever you want to use. And I'm just going to start, now I've got this one, my beehive, I'm just going to start by stitching on the door, and I'm just using some 2 strands of embroidery floss here with a normal size sewing needle, and very simply I'm just going to do a running stitch around the door. And this is something really good about felt, is if you're not so confident with hand sewing, it won't show up very much because felt's very forgiving like that. It sort of buries the stitches for you, which is nice. Okay, so if you all know what a running stitch is, it's just small stitches around, leaving gaps in between, so nothing complicated. Okay, and then I'll show you the next bit so that you can go on with that. For the next part, I have a brown that is a little bit darker than the brown of my hive. This part's optional too, by the way, it's just adds a nice little touch. And you can see how we've got the bumps for the beehive. So imagine for each bump being a section, a line coming across, and I'm going to stitch a line from one side to the other. You could mark the line with a bit of dressmaker's chalk or something like that that's going to come off. You don't want to mark it with pen or pencil or anything like that, because you want something that's not going to show. You could mark it on the back side and stitch through that way if you wanted to. Okay, so let's get that part done and then we'll check back in with each other. So that's my beehive all done. You see just the basic running stitch 3 times and a running stitch around the door just to keep it on there. So that means we can do our little bees now. Do the largest bee first. And yeah, these pieces are a little bit finicky, but pretty cute, so I think it's worth the trouble. So we're just going to, using some yellow embroidery floss, I'm going to put on the yellow stripes. So you see what I've done there? Cut the body out of black and then cut some stripes in yellow that way. Now if you didn't want to cut the stripes out in yellow, you could actually embroider stripes across with your floss. So I'm just going to hold that there, and once again we can just do some little running stitches, making the stitches a bit smaller this time because we've got such a small piece to put on. Okay, let's turn that around and I'll do the other side as well. So you end up with some cute little stitches on there that look nice as well. Oops. Then we'll put the second stripe on. Okay, so just holding that and using the same piece of floss, we can just do some little stitches again. got any excess for the stripe, if it's sticking out a little bit, you can trim it flush with the body. Using felt's nice because it's kind of fuzzy like a bee is. So we'll just knot that off now. So usually once you've made a knot with embroidery floss, you can just bury the thread like that. The knot's then buried and you can cut it off close to the fabric without cutting the fabric itself. Alright, so then he just needs his wings, and I think what I'll do is I'll stitch the wings on the underside. That'll just hold it all together, so like this. You can use pen to trace onto your felt when you're cutting your templates out, because felt's so thick it can be hard to make lines on there. So I will often actually use pen, as long as I'm sure that the pen is not going to be visible in the end. So the pen is visible on this piece, it's going to be the underside of the bee and it's not going to show, so it's okay. And as long as I'm sure the pen's not going to bleed, which I've never had a problem with anyway. So we just need a couple of little stitches on the back of the wings at the points just to secure them, and the same on the other side. Oh, so fiddly. Here we go. It's just positioning things. Alright. There. Okay, these stitches don't have to be really strong or anything, you don't have to worry about that. It's really just to get the wings positioned so that when you put them onto the cushion they're not going anywhere. And then you can knot that off. And I've got a bit of a tangle in mine, but I'll sort that out. And do the same with your other bees, and then we'll come back and we'll look at positioning them on the cushion front. Now that we've got all of our felt pieces sewn together, we can grab our pillow insert and just drape your front panel over it to get an idea of how it's going to look once it's on there, what shape it's going to be, and then you can get an idea of where you want to be placing your felt pieces. So I was thinking that I would like the beehive to be there, and then I can just play around with things. So I could go, well, I like the big bee to look like it's flying in. I want one bee to look like it's coming out of the door, and I could do another bee flying all the way up here, or I could put the bees mostly on the beehive like so. It's really up to you where you want to place them. So have a look around, just test the ground, and then once you have the position that's most pleasing for you, you can take some pins and start pinning them, just gently pinning them into place so that you can get that positioning. Don't pin into your pillow insert, of course, just onto the top of the cushion. My pieces are all pinned on, so we're ready to sew them on now, just with, like we were doing before, just simple running stitches. Now I've chosen a brown embroidery floss that's a little bit closer to this colour, but if you only have the other brown that you used for doing the lines on the hive, that's absolutely fine as well. and 2 strands just as before. So because we've got that pinned on there, we can just start coming up from the back and doing little running stitches around. Now if you find it easier to put this in an embroidery hoop, you can go ahead and do that, but for me, just because it's a fairly quick thing, I'm just going to do it like this. Trying to hold it so that you can see as well, but so it's comfortable for me. So we're just going to run around the whole outside of this hive just to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. I actually really enjoy this sort of work. I sort of started out in embroidery, really. It all started when my first kids were really little still, and my mother-in-law gave me an old biscuit tin, and inside were all these old embroideries that she hadn't finished, and all of these old embroidery threads, and she just thought that I might use it sometime, and so I did. I started to use them, and I did some red work and a few other sort of simple designs that just using back stitch and stem stitch and all those kind of things. And then I really got into the embroidery, and I ended up doing a couple of courses, one with the Embroidery Guild that was an intermediate course in stump work, which was just fantastic. My kids were really little at the time, and it was just really a great experience for me to go and be able to have a break from my home duties and do this beautiful stump work embroidery. And I've also done a course in crewel work, which I love as well, using wool. But in recent years, the weaving has really taken over, and as you know, as you would know, embroidery is very time consuming. You can only get a small amount done at a time. So I kind of miss it, but I think, oh well, you know, perhaps when I'm older I'll get back to it a bit more. Or perhaps by then I might have arthritic hands, or my eyes might be going, but oh, you know, it's all good. I like to think that everything I've done before weaving has sort of led me to this place, because now I can combine skills. Not that I would really call this embroidery, this is, you know, just basic stitching, and it's good to have that skill too, just to be able to do that. Adds variety to your projects, and it makes you more of an all-rounder, I guess. So I'm nearly halfway around my hive. My bees are staying put very well, and I'll stitch them on next. My 7-year-old just brought in a picture that she drew. It's a bakery with a house on top. She said that the family who run the bakery live on top, and I thought that was quite cute, because we're reading All of a Kind Family, where the family live on top of a shop in New York. So I guess that's where that inspiration came from. So let's go on with what we were doing. My beehive is all sewn on, and all we have to do is put the bees on. And to attach the bees, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to sew mine on really firmly, but if you've got little ones around who like to stick things in their mouths, you might want to put yours on more firmly. So for this one, I'm just going to come up from the back, and I'm just using black embroidery thread. I'll get that pin out of the way now. Alright, so position him where I want him to stay, and I'll just go through that a couple of times, and that'll probably be it. I'm sure a little one would love to pluck a bee off a cushion front and pop it in their mouth, wouldn't they? So just watch out for that. And then we'll turn that over, knot it off. And then we'll do the same with the other bees. Let's make a knot. And my children are at that in-between age. My youngest one is 7 now, so I don't need to worry so much about all the little things around the house like I used to. But I suppose a few of you are grandmas as well, grandparents, and you'd have to be considering those sorts of things once again. So just a few stitches through. Pin out, knot it off.